Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Well, hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Get Trauma Informed Mini Recovery Talks. I have with me my partner, Coach Michael Bart Matthews. How are you today?
Hello, Wellness Coach Liz. I am fantastic, and wonderfully made this morning. I'm ready to rock and roll and get it going and get it flowing and keep it growing.
Well, all right then. I love that positive energy, y'all. Today we're going to have an impromptu conversation about trauma triggers. Ooh, I'm telling you, that's a big one. Coach Mike, what do you think about trauma triggers?
Well, first of all, this is a hot seat moment. We didn't plan this, and we didn't even plan the attire that we have on. We just started to come on with it to give you some trauma-informed information. And the question was, what do I think about trauma triggers? Trauma triggers to me and my life and my experience, as well as with the clients that we've been coaching, are events, smells, noises, experiences that you may come into in the present time that triggers a past trauma-related experience in three areas of your life. In your inner child, your inner adolescence, and your young adult. I'm going to also say mature adult. I'm going to also add a baby boomer, because the baby boomers have gray hair. But we still experience those different trauma triggers. And if you don't know what they are, you don't realize them, you can act a certain way and not knowing why you're acting that way. And the people around you will look at you like, what the heck is going on with Big Mike Matthews? Well, he just had a trauma trigger and he's just out of control mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually right now. But by me knowing what my triggers are, I was able to hone in on that particular area of my life and still be the man that I am today.
Wow, that is so good. And for me, because I do have I often am triggered by certain conversations, certain, temperaments. And I think though, with awareness, when you become aware of what your triggers are, you can not only like all of these different mini trauma talks and the different support groups and things that we have going on. It's because a lot of us are walking in unawareness and we don't understand. And then when we come into awareness, it kind of puts us off balance, because now we have to examine ourselves, right? And because, like CDC says, that 70 to 80% of the population have gone through some form of trauma, that means that when you meet somebody, it's almost a cinch that either they've gone through some trauma or they're supporting somebody with that have gone through trauma. And for me, it has been pretty much my life now, because now that I understand it, I'm playing catch up so that I can either go back and recover everything that trauma stole from me. So sometimes relationships are a little bit difficult, especially when you are now educating other people on how you operate and how you flow.
Yes, and with comments from our wellness coach Liz, she used the word relationships. And in relationships, there's two conversations. One is called trauma bonding, and another one is called counter transference of trauma from one person to the next. And those are things that just happen organically by you not being aware of the trauma triggers. So let me just point your eyes to that picture of me today sitting on that stool. He would look like he has nothing wrong with him, and he's, on the Wheaties box, Breakfast of Champions, or on Cheerios like Michael Jordan. But inside of that suit, inside of that skin, inside of that skull, within the mind, body, spirit, and soul of Michael Bart Matthews, there were things going around in his head that he didn't know what was happening when it came to his past trauma experiences versus how it affected him today in the presence with his inner self, also with his outer self in relationships with everybody that he came in contact with. So being trauma aware first, being trauma informed second, and learning what the triggers are third, help that person to really be as smooth as he looks in that picture because he is aware of his trauma and his triggers. That's the only reason. If not, he would be smooth, but not in that picture. On the inside, he'd be toe up from the flow up.
That
So
is so
whenever I
good.
go ahead, wellness coach.
No, I was just saying that was good. Go ahead, keep going. That was good.
Oh yeah, so and sometimes and the subject of trauma is a hard subject for some, and it's a 100-pound emotional baggage blocker lifter for others. Because when you listen, learn, and apply to the help, training, and assistance, and finally understand how you think, how you act, and more importantly, how you react to certain people, certain places, certain things, certain smells, certain sounds, certain music, certain everything that triggers you to go back to that place where that trauma was affecting you, then you are a better person.
That is so, so, so good. I love everything that you just said. I want to go back to a couple of things. You talked about trauma bonding, and let's understand what that is. Trauma bonding is when you have a trauma and someone else has a trauma, and then you relate to each other and you bond over the trauma versus the actual circumstances or the situation that's there. You bond over that trauma. And we talk about unhealthy relationships. Oftentimes, especially if you go into a trauma bonding relationship and you don't allow yourself to really get to know one another. We talk about whether it's friendships or whether it is a romantic relationship. If you don't allow yourself to really get to know each other, right, and know what makes each other tick, you can cause that other person, you can trigger that other person because you haven't really taken the time to really get to know each other. I'm going to talk about that, but I also wanted to bring up the fact that the reason that we're talking about awareness is because a lot of people are covering up their trauma with addictions. And I mean, they become addictions because they're going into unhealthy habits versus doing the work. The work is challenging, but doing the work is very, very rewarding. So if you do the work in your working through whatever the issue is by becoming aware, getting off of that cycle of addiction, by becoming aware of what your trauma is and accepting, yes, this is, rather it's an addiction, rather it's abuse, or rather it's trauma, but coming off of that cycle of addiction. And it takes work to do that, right? And so when we're talking about the traumas that you have and you're covering it up with some type of a drug, sex, gaming, whatever you're covering it up with, that becomes an unhealthy habit. Anything that is in excess is an addiction. So now you have trauma, undealt with trauma that you suppress, which is progressive, and it's going to it's going to sit there and fester until you deal with it, or you're going to cover it up. Now you got two issues. You got suppressed trauma, and then you have the addiction. So oftentimes somebody can mirror that to you and show you that, and if you don't want to do the work in it, we talk about self-determination. If you don't want to do the work in it, it's not going to get better. It's going to progressively get worse. It's going to damage your health if it's an unhealthy habit. It's going to damage your finances if it's a shopping addiction, or if it's a gaming addiction. You're never going to get anything done because you're sucked into that game. If it's alcohol or sex, you're doing that in excess. It's a risky behavior. If it's marijuana or any other type of a drug, you're damaging your body physically. So oftentimes somebody with a trauma will trigger you if you're in an unhealthy space.
Yes, and you're listening to two certified addiction recovery coaches and certified abuse recovery coaches and certified recovery practitioners who've went through a rigorous program for us to be able to first know who we are on the inside and understand the same things that we are talking to you all about. Actually, we were going through them and didn't know what they were. So before we can gain this knowledge and be able to use it effectively to the global marketplace, which is each and every one of you, no matter what continent you live in, listening to the sound of our voices, to be better from within yourself, we had to be better from within ourselves and pump the brakes and stop and say, hey, it happened to me when I was in fifth grade or when I was in high school. One of my trauma triggers is a gun. or a gunshot. I heard the trigger cocked up to my head when somebody put a gun to my head. And I can hear that trigger all the time. Even when I look at a Western, I see it. When I look at Law and Order or something and a gun happens, I see it and it comes to light in the first place. But because I listen, learned, and applied to the help, training, and assistance from professionals in order to become a professional, I was trauma aware, I was trauma informed, and I know what the triggers are, and I know how to balance myself and ground myself and continue to help and serve others as we were helped and served ourselves.
That is so good because when I think about triggers, I think about, and if you read our books, some of our books out there, you'll hear our stories because what one of my triggers is blood, right? Because I witnessed that as a young child or abuse or that is those are my triggers. But if I know this, then I can keep myself out of situations like watching movies that are just gory, right? It's just certain things that I know will trigger me that I have to do a self-care. So what you all are getting here when Coach Mike just labeled off some of our expertise or professional guidance, you're getting lived experience because we've lived through some of this. And you're getting where we intersect with professional guidance. So whenever you are, if wherever you are in the journey, whether you're working through your trauma yourself or whether you are helping and supporting somebody else that have gone through trauma, we have programs and resources available to help you put together your own individual self-care plan that will help you through walking through it. Sometimes therapy, it works for some people. Sometimes coaching is a better option for you because you're more involved in the process. So I say chocolate or vanilla, whichever you choose, is just going to be a different experience.
Yes, and inside our book Pathway to Trauma Recovery, we have 14 content contributors, 13 authors, and one professional ex-retired football player, Marcus Ogden, at the top, who contributed the wonderful forward and amazing part of his story as well. And within that group of people, we have, I think it's 5 ministers, two honorary PhDs in theology. We have three CARC, certified addiction recovery coaches, certified addiction abuse coaches. Did I leave anybody out, Doc?
4 spiritual counselors, 5 ministers, and everybody else are experienced in being trauma survivors.
And everybody took that chapter out of their head and put it in our Path to Recovery book so it could be published and read in the global marketplace because our stories was therapeutic for us as we were writing them down. But we also knew that our stories can help each and every one of you who are listening to the sound of my voice. So what did Chris Tucker say to Jackie Chan in the movie Rush Hour when Jackie Chan wasn't listening? He said, "Can you hear the words coming out of my mouth?" So I'm Chris Tucker, Dr. Liz and Jackie Chan. Can you hear the words coming out of our Pathway to Recovery book mouth? Is the message that we really want to give you guys. Yes, we like to have a little fun, but this is a serious subject because we, like you, do not want to stay in our past trauma, but we live with it every day. I can tell you each and every event that happened to me, but it doesn't affect me to the point where I can't be an effective person, an effective communicator, a effective coach, an effective student, and an effective guidance or a mentor to myself or somebody else. But that's because I'm trauma aware and trauma informed.
That is absolutely amazing. And I think with that, Coach Mike, you just dropped the mic on the mini trauma recovery talk. If you want more resources and information, or if you want to join our Pathway to Trauma Recovery book study and recovery support group, go on over to oasiswellnessctrs.com. Again, that's oasiswellnessctrs.com. Look under the tab that says book, study, and support groups. And one other thing before I leave, I cannot leave without letting you know, if you have a story in your head that you want to be published and read, We Create Books is one of our sponsors, and We Create Books is the best safe place for you to get your story out of your head so that it can be published and read. With that being said, we look forward to seeing you on the inside of one of our programs or reading your stories at We Create Books. All righty, Coach Mike, you have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining me in this impromptu mini trauma recovery talk.
Wellness Coach Liz, if you live it, you know it, we know it, so we lived it. Thank you very much.
Bye for now, everybody.
Bye for now.
It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you were collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.